Hello, my name is Ian Collins, and this is my professional development assignment for Consumer Affairs 499. For part A, my name is Ian Collins. I am a fourth year Consumer Affairs major here at CSUOB, and for my professional development assignment, I chose to conduct an intercultural interview by finding a classmate, faculty member, campus staff, or acquaintance whose diversity is different from my own. Part B is an experience with cross-cultural communication prior to the interview. So my experience with cross-cultural communication prior to this interview, I would say I grew up with a lot of diversity around me. I grew up in Fountain Valley, California, which is predominantly Vietnamese and Asian families. So I grew up with a lot of Asian people growing up, as well as my family is all white. And so having that mix was obviously cool. And then I played many different sports. I played football, basketball, and baseball when I was younger. So through that and traveling to different tournaments and sporting events and cities, states all over the country, you get to meet a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. And I think that's cool to learn and see how other people grew up and what they believe and want to do. And I think it helps kind of mold you are into the person you are today. So part C is specific details related to the interview relating to the questions that were asked. So I chose to interview my friend Kyle. Kyle I met him in high school and we weren't overly close. And throughout college, we had some classes together and became a lot closer. So Kyle, when I asked what label he associates with, he said he's Asian and he's Thai. His family is from Thailand. So when I asked him about if he feels tied to his culture on a daily basis, or like how he relates to it, he says that he doesn't really. He says that he knows what ethnicity is and what culture he is, but that he doesn't wake up every day and the first thing he thinks is, oh, I feel tied today. No, he says he feels like every other person does. When I asked about if he feels like he faces any discrimination for being Thai, he said that not particularly for being Thai, but that he will and has experienced stereotypes, just typical Asian stereotypes. He said an example of this, his major is journalism and PR. And so that's what he likes to do. That's kind of how his mind is geared. But people will ask him for help on math homework and stuff like that. And he said that's like an example of a stereotype that he'll face. When I asked him about highly valued traditions and rituals within his culture, like I had said earlier, he doesn't feel like his culture takes too much of a part in his everyday life, but that he would say that they're very family oriented. And I've seen that in Kyle's life. There's a lot of times where I'll text him on a Saturday and be, hey, do you want to hang out today? He said, no, we have a big family barbecue. And he talked about his family is very tight knit. I know he has a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles, and his grandparents and great grandparents, they still all live pretty close to each other and they enjoy spending lots of time together. And I asked him if there's any positive experiences that he felt that he's gone through because of how he identifies. And he said that his favorite thing is the food. He said that the Thai food is just phenomenal. He said they like to make a lot of pad Thai and Thai boat noodles. When I asked if there's any specifics of meals that his family made that stood out to him. And when asked about the roles and responsibilities that he thinks family members in his culture feel, he said there's no really specific roles that stand out, just like a typical family would. The dad's kind of the provider, the protector of the family. And that it's very similar to American households. But he did say that one thing that he thinks he feels more than other cultures is just the need to take care of each other. Kyle expressed how his grandma lives with his family, with his parents and siblings and stuff, because in her old age, they feel they need to take care of her. Thought that was pretty cool because that's just something very unique. Speaking of unique, I asked him if there's any rituals or things like that that they do that's tied to his culture. And he said the only thing that he could think of is when someone in the family dies, since they're all very close and live close to each other, they all meet up and they have a funeral, but they also have a different celebration where everyone comes over and they make a lot of food and hang out together. And they have some monks come over and they do kind of a ritual ceremony and everyone prays and blesses the person that's passed. Thought that was super interesting. And yeah, that was my interview with Kyle. So part D is the relevance of the points made by the TED Talk speaker. So the speaker of the TED Talk that we watch, I'm sure I'm going to butcher this name, is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And she is an African writer and speaker. And so her whole thing was about the power of just a single story. So at first, I was like, wasn't sure what to expect. And after watching it, what she means by a single story is just seeing one side of a particular person, of anything, a concept. So she talks about how she grew up in Africa and she always read Western literature. All the characters in the books were blonde hair, blue eye, white people. And she joked about it. They ate apples and drank ginger beer and talked about the weather. I found that pretty funny personally because the weather is definitely something that white people talk about all the time, myself included. I'll text my friend, yo, it's gonna be 8 today. We need to go outside and get some sun. She talks about how that isn't something that she did growing up in Nigeria, and that's just what she thought. And so she came across African books and she realized that there's more out there. And so when she talks about just seeing one story, she talks about when she moved to America to go to college, she had a white roommate, and the white roommate just assumed that she didn't know how to work the stove. And she used examples like that to talk about how that's what Americans and white people viewed Africa as, because they only saw quote unquote one story. They only saw one version of it, one depiction. And she thinks that the stereotypical depiction of Africans stems from Western literature. We're only talking about, you see books of them living in very uncivilized cultures when that is far from the truth. And she thinks that single stories can give stereotypes because when you only see one side of something, you don't have any other version. You don't see how deep and complex people can be. You only see just the one thing you read. And that one thing, that one story can become the only story. So she just wanted to make the point to look into things, don't judge too quickly, and not to just read one story about things. So for part E, new information or awareness that came about as a result of the interview. So through the process of watching the TEDx video, as well as interviewing my good friend Kyle, there were 3 main things that I feel like I took away from this whole process. So the first one is that everyone has a story, and not just one, but lots of them, as that is the main theme that our speaker in the TEDx video spoke about. That, as the cliche saying goes, don't judge a book by its cover. Just our initial impression of someone, or what we may have learned about someone, or read about them or whatnot, is not the full picture. People are much more complex and diverse and have much more to them than we may see just from one interaction with them. Another thing that I took away is that not everyone who's associated with a culture or an ethnic group or a religion is extremely devout to it. And I feel like I may have had this preconceived notion because I didn't grow up with a religion, or I feel like I didn't have too much culture in my life growing up, that religious people, for example, I just had assumed that everything they did and said and every action they made was in alliance and aimed to appease God and that sort of thing, when that may not be true. And I kind of saw that with Kyle when I was asking him questions. He was talking about how he doesn't wake up every day feeling Ty. He wakes up feeling Kyle. He doesn't, it's a part of his life and it means a lot to him, but it's not everything. And the third thing I learned is that be open-minded and ask questions and ask following questions and stuff like that. There may be really cool things about someone or about a culture or religion that you may not know. For example, I lived with Kyle. He was my roommate for a year, and I had no idea about the ritual he does or his family does when someone passes away. How the monks come and they all eat and they pray for the person who's passed and kind of live their life or like relive their life and talk about it and stuff like that. And I think it's important to be open-minded and be curious because there's a lot out there that we may not even be aware of. And yeah, that concludes it.